Hey guys, it's Greg with Apple Explained, and today we're going to explore what life was like before the iPhone existed. Because if you were born in the 2000s, the iPhone and its related technology has likely always been a part of your life. But it's important to understand what things were like before the iPhone in order to truly appreciate how far we've come today. Now, this video topic was the second place winner of last week's voting poll, and if you didn't get to vote, make sure you're subscribed. That way, the voting polls will show up right in your mobile activity feed, and you can let me know which video you'd like to see next. So before the iPhone was introduced in 2007, many industries looked a lot different than they do today, and you may be surprised to discover how products worked and how certain tasks were accomplished without the use of modern technology that the iPhone popularized. And I want to start with the multi-touch display, which was perhaps the most influential feature of the original iPhone. Because although touchscreens had already been invented, very few were designed to be used with your fingers. Instead, the vast majority of touchscreen devices before the iPhone had what were called resistive displays that came with styluses in order to be used with precision. In fact, an entire industry of these devices began in the 90s with something called the PDA. Interestingly, Apple themselves had pioneered this market with their Newton message pad, first released in 1993, and while it was considered very innovative for its time, the Newton didn't work as advertised. Its handwriting recognition software was very unreliable, and it sold for $700, which is about $1,200 today. So needless to say, many customers felt it was overpriced. But the Newton wasn't the only touchscreen PDA to be released, because in 1997, the more affordable Palm Pilot was introduced and enjoyed much more commercial success than the Newton. And as this touchscreen technology became more affordable, it started to be utilized by products in other categories. For example, in 2006, the Nintendo DS featured a stylus-based touchscreen similar to what was seen on PDAs in the 90s. But the following year, in 2007, the iPhone turned the concept of the touchscreen on its head because it featured what's called a capacitive multi-touch display, and this means it responded through contact with a finger as opposed to a resistive touchscreen which responded to pressure from any object like a stylus. And this new technology had implications that many companies weren't ready to address. The biggest being, if you interact with a touchscreen with your finger, you have to build a completely new operating system that's optimized for touch rather than previous operating systems like on PDAs or on computers that required the precision of the tip of a cursor or stylus. And this brings me to the second influential feature the iPhone had, and that is its touch-based operating system that included inertial scrolling and multi-touch elements like pinch to zoom. But perhaps the most important aspect of the iPhone's operating system was that it felt natural to use, since it mimicked interactions we have with objects in real life. For example, when you flick a marble, how fast and far it goes depends on how hard you flick it. So when you flick through your contacts on your iPhone, you expect the movement of the page to react to the speed of your flick, and executing this concept successfully is part of what set the iPhone apart from its competition. So when other smartphone companies saw the iPhone's impressive software, they were forced to go back to the drawing board and come up with ways to make multi-touch based smartphones of their own. And this helped push the entire software industry forward by prioritizing a natural, fluid interface rather than trying to provide the most features of any smartphone. But the iPhone didn't just help simplify its competition's operating systems, it also helped simplify their hardware. Because before the iPhone, smartphones were covered in buttons. Function buttons, keyboard buttons, control buttons, and navigation buttons, which left very little room for the display. So part of what made the iPhone's design so stunning was the fact that it had just one button on the front, the home button, and that left space for a 3.5-inch multi-touch display, which was considered huge at the time. And again, this prompted other smartphone manufacturers to put more screen on their phones and less buttons. But this technology wasn't only used in smartphones. Capacitive touchscreens began to be adopted by cars, video game systems, tablets, computers, appliances, kiosks, and more. Now there is one other hardware feature that may sound insignificant, but actually killed an entire industry, and that was the camera. Because if you remember back before the iPhone, it was very common to own a digital camera in addition to your cell phone and iPod. But when smartphones like the iPhone featured a built-in camera that shot photos comparable to traditional point-and-shoot cameras, people stopped carrying them around and therefore stopped buying them. And the effect of this behavior can be seen today since the most popular camera in the world is the iPhone's camera. And Apple has even highlighted this feature with several shot on the iPhone marketing campaigns. So considering all the devices the iPhone has replaced, it's easy to see how convenient our lives have become. Because no longer do you have to listen to music on your iPod while texting friends on your cell phone and carrying around a digital camera to capture those special moments. Instead, we use different apps to accomplish these tasks, all of which run on one device, your iPhone. And that brings me to something else that made the iPhone thousands of times more capable than any device before it, and that is the App Store, a place where any third-party app developer could create and submit apps for download on the iPhone. And this was something never seen before in the mobile phone industry. Yeah, there were a handful of third-party apps that could be installed on some smartphones, but it was nothing like the marketplace that the App Store introduced, which grew to offer millions of free or low-cost third-party apps. And this completely altered the way we get things done. So instead of using MapQuest on our computers, we use the Maps app on our phones. And instead of looking for movie times on Yahoo, we just downloaded Fandango, where we could not only look up movie times, but also buy, reserve, and purchase tickets. And instead of sitting at our computer and Googling restaurants, we just downloaded Yelp, where we could not only find restaurants, but see the menu, make a reservation, get directions, and see reviews. So it could be said that the iPhone and its App Store was sort of the second act of the computer revolution, because while computers and the internet made information faster and easier to access, the iPhone took things to the next level. And this is part of the reason why Apple says we're entering the post-personal computer era, and I think they're right. In fact, I'd argue the post-PC era has already begun, because if you think about it, the amount of time most people spend in front of their computer has fallen dramatically since iPhones and tablets have become the most common way to consume content. And considering the iPad in particular, it's become more powerful than some models of MacBook Pro, and we're already seeing professional level content creation apps like Photoshop being made available. So your vision for the future would have to be quite limited not to understand that the ease of use, accessibility, capabilities, and power of the iPad will soon eclipse that of the personal computer. And while some people may have to hold onto their computer longer than others, eventually, virtually all people will be using tablets. And the reason why I keep referring to the iPad rather than tablets in general is because there really isn't any other tablet in the industry that can compare to the capabilities and performance of the iPad while retaining a true touch-based operating system. And this in large part is due to the iPhone, which pioneered iOS, one of the most popular multi-touch operating systems that was originally intended for the iPad. Because Jobs admitted that Apple was working on creating a tablet before a smartphone. But when Jobs saw the multi-touch software running on a prototype display, he knew creating a smartphone was much more important at the time. But that shouldn't be misinterpreted as the iPad not being an important product, because that's been a running theme since its introduction in 2010. Many people felt that the iPad was just a larger iPod Touch, but Jobs understood the potential the iPad had to disrupt the computer industry, and I think that's exactly where we're headed. So with the iPhone ushering in the touch-based tech revolution, I want to take a moment and reflect on how that's changed the role of technology in most people's lives. The first being how we interact with each other. I remember when I was a kid, I would call my friend on a tethered house phone, which meant my entire family heard the conversation. But as I got older, the ways I've communicated with others has changed dramatically. Cell phones meant having a direct private line to anyone whose number I had, and texting made communication even more private and accessible since I could text at any time without anyone around me even knowing. But internet-based social media services like Facebook really changed the game, because it wasn't just about communicating anymore. It was about sharing certain parts of my life to a large community of people, or vice versa, seeing parts of other people's lives in ways that were never possible before. For example, if I wanted to send my friend a photo I took on my digital camera, then I'd have to transfer it to my computer and send it to him through email. But today, you can literally take a picture and share it with thousands of people within seconds, something that would be hard to imagine just 10 years ago. So if you consider how far we've come since the iPhone's introduction, who knows where we'll be in the next decade? But no matter where we end up or what we're capable of doing, I always think it's important to look back at where we've been. So that is what life was like before the iPhone, and if you want to vote for the next video topic, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.